Hey everyone, in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to create realistic fire effects in your composite images. Everyone should have a PSD with two layers. We have our fire and our background. So for this we will need a fire overlay, which I am providing for you guys, and it was a combination of a couple of these fires. I think it was this one, and this one. And I just stuck them all three together. And so that is what we'll work with today. But if you have the whole collection of my fire overlays or you have your own, feel free to use those as well. I'm just going to zoom in here a bit before we get started. All right, so once you place your overlay on, you're going to most of the time put it in screen blend mode. Occasionally you can use color dodge, lighten. There's a few. You can also use a combination. So maybe you put one in screen and then you add another one, put that in color dodge. Just play around with it and see what looks best for your particular photo, because it will depend on how your lighting is. This one, as you can see, I chose this one because it's pretty dark up front here, which is going to let us see the adjustments pretty well. Why you would have a fire here, I don't know, but I thought this would be a good example. Maybe you could make this a little campfire and place your subject sitting on the rocks. That could work, but yeah, we're just going to work on the fire part today. So the first thing I'm going to do is come down below that fire layer, and I'm going to get two solid color layers, one in a bright orange tone and then one in a bright red tone. And we may change these as we go along, but it'll be a good starting point for now. Maybe something like that. I'm going to turn that off. Now this orange one we're going to set to linear dodge. And I'll just lower the flow on my brush, and you're just going to come in and start painting anywhere where these highlights would be touching. And don't worry if it looks unrealistic or hazy. We're going to adjust that in just a minute. But I just want to get this on here, and then I'll double click over here to the right of the layer and we'll use our blend if. And I'm going to start in the darker areas and start fading some of that out. Maybe to about here, and then just a little tweaking in the highlights. I don't think they need too much. I'll click OK, and then I always like to turn it off and on to just see how that looks. And I think I'll just lower the fill a bit. Then I'm going to come to our red layer, and we're going to set this to color dodge. And we're just going to do the same thing, just brush it in here. And actually I need to put this one on this rock as well. I'd have a little light here. And then again, I'm just going to go back to my red and start adding that. And we're going to do the same thing. Go ahead and double click and use your blend if. And then I'll come to the fire itself and I'll make a copy, and then we're going to blur this. I'm going to go to about 185 pixels, and I'm going to grab it and just move it up a bit. So that's looking good. Now we'll work on the next part where we're going to come in to each of these layers with a black brush, low flow. I'll just keep it where it's at, and you just want to take it off some of the shadow areas so that those don't get too bright with the rest of it, because the light wouldn't really be hitting those. I'm actually going to lower my opacity as well and just come back through, and this will help define those little rocks again. I'm going to try to hit most of them, but you guys should definitely take more time than I'm going to today and just get as many as you can. I know for a lot of your images it may be a ton, or you may barely have anything up there that you have to do, but I would just take your time on that part and really kind of bring those back, because it does help a lot. think I could use just a little more light up here. And so I'm just kind of going back and forth with my black and white brush on these layers. Like I said, bringing back some of that shadow and maybe adding some if I see a little area that needs a little more of that highlight. Alright, I think that's pretty good for now. The next thing we'll do is add some spark. So let's get another bright solid color layer. I'll choose like an orangish yellow. Set that to color dodge and we'll invert it, and then with our brush we'll go to the brush settings and I'm going to make this hard and we will space this out. Then we'll go to the shape dynamics and I'm going to bring the size jitter up, the angle roundness, and I'm going to bring the minimum roundness all the way down. Make sure you click on your flip X and Y, and then we'll go to the scattering, and I have my scatter up, and play around with the count. It depends on how many, if you just want a few or you want kind of clusters of them. Let me go ahead and see what this looks like so far. Okay, so I definitely want those spaced out more, so I'm going to bring that all the way up. And I think I'll go ahead and bring my minimum diameter up, and then we're going to click on transfer. And you can set yours as mine are or just play around and see what you like. But I like to have some of them faded a little so that it looks a little more realistic, like they're a little bit further behind. And with this step as well, you can make a couple copies so that you can do a little bit of depth. So if you just want some that are smaller and closer to the fire, you can do those on this layer, and then a second layer you can make some larger ones that are a little more blurry. So I'll go ahead and paint these on. Right, and then I'll go to the next layer and make a few that are a little bigger. And with these bigger ones, I'm going to go ahead and blur them. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And with the smaller ones, I'll go ahead and put a little bit of a motion blur on those. And you can make these in all directions, so you can make a layer of them going up and down and then another layer of them going to the side, because they do tend to kind of go all over the place. Right, I'm going to go back to my fire layer, and then we're going to convert that to a smart filter, and we're going to go to filter gallery. And you're going to choose the glass and play around with your distortion. This is going to give it that like heat haze type of effect that you get with fire sometimes, where it makes things look a little blurry. Maybe something like that. It's very subtle. I'm going to set these color dot or these larger ones to linear dots just to make them a little different, and then I'm going to lower the fill a bit. They're just standing out a little too much for me. All right. And then we can create a little bit of smoke. So I'm going to get a blank layer, and I'm going to go to edit and fill that with black. And then we'll go to filter, render, and clouds. Now, of course, you can use smoke brushes or smoke overlays. They probably would look the most realistic, but I just kind of want to show you how to create as much from scratch in Photoshop today as I can. Now typically I will make this a lot larger, and I probably will, but right now I'm going to go ahead and set it to screen, and then I'm going to get a levels adjustment layer and clip that down, and we're just going to make it so that this looks a little more faded out. So something like that maybe. And then I'm going to zoom out here and grab these clouds and then Controller Command T for that. And then up here, I'm gonna put in maybe about 500. And you can see how that looks a bit more like smoke than before. So now you can just take this. And by the way, this is also how you can make fog in Photoshop, which we have a tutorial a month or two ago on that using this method. But we're going to use this for smoke today. So I'm going to go ahead and merge this together, and then we have to put it back into our screen blend mode. And then you can just move it around until you get a bit that looks good for you. I think I might even turn it. Maybe I'll use this bit here. So we'll put a mask on that and invert it and just brush it on. When you're making these overlays really large, it can take a minute for it to transform, so you just have to be patient for that. So you're just going to take your soft round brush, or if you have a fog brush or a smoke brush, you can use that. And just brush it on. I'm going to lower the flow and opacity a little. Oops, let me go ahead and get rid of those brush settings that we did for the sparks. And this is just going to be subtle. These type of fires typically wouldn't have a huge plume of smoke coming out. And then if you still need further adjustment, you can go back to your levels and do that. You can also add a bit of tone into there if you like. So for example, maybe I want this smoke to be a little warmer. I'll just get my warming filter and clip that down, and then you can play around with the density. Another fun thing to do, which I'm sure you guys have seen me do a million times, is a dissolve layer. So again, I'll choose a fiery tone and just set that to dissolve. Invert it. I'm going to go ahead and lower the opacity on my layer and brush that on. And if I zoom in here, you can see that bit of kind of noise that it added just to give a little bit more texture to the fire. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and group it and turn it off and on so I can see how it's looking. And that is a great fire. So the only other thing that I would suggest is just like I said, going in and painting in more of the highlights and shadows around these areas, which will help it just kind of pop a little bit more, look a little more realistic. So for that, you could use curves, which is what I typically like to use, and just invert it. So I'll do one layer where I bring my midpoint down and one where I bring my midpoint up, and then just come in and paint over those highlights and shadows. And I will say this part is a lot more fun if you have a tablet. I'm going to go ahead and set this blend mode to color dodge. I know I'm starting to get pretty messy with it, but don't worry about it. Once we put our adjustments on it, it'll blend right in. Alright, so I think that's about all I'm going to do for that. Now for the burning that we did, we're just going to double click and feather the layer mask. And then for the dodging, we'll use our blend if. So I settled on something like that. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and then we're going to blur this. Go ahead and convert that to a smart filter first. We get something like that, and you can keep going and brush more onto the rocks or whatever it is that you have in your image that you would like to add those highlights to. Actually, one last thing I'm going to do, just because I feel like the fire is just a little too yellow, is let me clip a color balance layer to it. Go into the highlights. And maybe something more like that. And I'll go ahead and close up this group so we can see the before and after of our fire. So I hope that helps you guys light up all of your nighttime composite images where you want to add a little bit of fire. These same techniques work if you just want to add glows from certain things like lanterns and lamps and things like that. I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial, and thanks for watching.